After losing his family in a ruthless superhuman attack, Han Sung-hyun retreats from the world, shattered by trauma, but everything changes when he discovers the power to control avatars. Using his overpowered clones, Sung-hyun sets out on a relentless path of vengeance. In a world of swords and magic, the fearsome immortal king warred against his rival, the Knight of Light. The monstrous monarch truly lived up to his name as the continent's nightmare, but the power of light was on humanity's side. Guided by this power, the Knight of Light was blessed with a luminous blade and wings. He was the paragon of righteousness. If you ask our MC, the fight between dark and light was a bit too theatrical for his taste. Well, he was just chilling on his couch, with snacks on the table, wrapped in a blanket while watching a performance after all. You see, this bum was actually witnessing two of his avatars fighting against one another with the fate of the world on the line. How did it end up like this? Let's rewind the clock a little bit to the day when everything changed. An investigator from the Special Investigations Department of the Ability Management Bureau was on Han Sung-hyun's doorstep to ask a few questions. From the weary look on his face, it was clear that he was not in the mood to talk to anyone about anything. The investigator quickly did his checks and left with a reminder to make sure to report to the Bureau if he ever awakens any abilities. Hearing the mention of awakening left a sour taste in the cripple's mouth. This short conversation with the investigator was the first human interaction he had with an outsider in half a year. He was just glad that it was over. But at least it meant he wouldn't need to open his front door for another 6 months for the next check. Most of his food supplies had already gone bad and expired. It had been 2 years since he touched grass and went out. I bet some of you could beat that record. Some would say that Han Sung-hyun was pathetic. They might curse him for being so weak-willed. But he was just another victim of this fucked-up world. Walking back to the couch, breaking news about an awakened arsonist committing random crimes before being transported to another world was airing. Those awakened people truly set a fiery emotion in Sung-hyun. One day, humanity began randomly awakening mysterious powers that defied the laws of nature and logic. Once someone awakens an ability, they would be forcibly transported to another world within 24 hours. If they met certain conditions, they would be able to return to Earth. But in reality, only a tiny fraction of awakeners could actually manage to survive and come back. As a result of feeling imminent doom, some unhinged, superpowered people would commit reckless and inhumane crimes before being forcibly transported. 2 years ago, Han Sung-hyun fell victim to one of these random acts of criminal madness. He lost his legs and his family in a blaze of lunacy. Maybe he also lost the courage to ever stand again. He tried his best to recover and rehabilitate his injuries as hard as he could, but it wasn't that simple. He had been keeping up with the routine in hopes of regaining some of his legs' functions to no avail. It felt like a pathetic attempt to take back what he lost from that incident. Han Sung-hyun changed. Now, he sank into terror at the thought of stepping a single foot outside the door. He wondered if something would have changed, if only he had been more courageous. He desperately wanted to escape the prison known as his own home and go anywhere at all. His self-deprecating thoughts were interrupted by the detection of a dimensional inflection point connecting him to the Akasha system. He randomly awakened a unique skill. Never in a million years could he have expected that this turn of events would happen. He was granted the unique skill simply called Avatar, not to be confused with the last Airbender. With the awakening came the 24-hour countdown until the mandatory transfer to another world. Han Sung-hyun was not ready for anything like this at all. Fate must be toying with him. Like an impatient commander, the system expedited the timer. If he didn't enter the transfer zone within the next few minutes, the forced escort feature would be enforced. Panicking, Sung-hyun crawled on the floor as fast as he could. He quickly rummaged through his closet for anything useful. People say that after being transferred, it would take someone at least a year to return to Earth. To make matters worse, time moves 10 times slower in other dimensions. That meant he would have to survive for 10 whole years to be able to return. With his spaghetti legs, could he even survive? Trembling in front of the assigned transfer zone in his living room, only 3 minutes were left for preparation. Sung-hyun packed every outdoor gear he could find in his closet, while fearfully staring at the countdown. He tried to step into the light, but he just couldn't do it. He couldn't even step outside his door before falling apart, and this system was forcing him to enter a different world with no power and skills. Forget about lasting for 10 whole years. He might not even survive for a whole day. Then he remembered the other notification he had just received. He was granted the ability called Avatar, so he shouted the activation at the top of his lungs, hoping that something would save him from this absurd situation. As soon as Sung-hyun opened his eyes, he was met with a perfect copy of his original body. From the appearance, clothes, and even the crutch, they were mirror images of one another. The original Sung-hyun suddenly felt a pang of pain in his brain. He started seeing two of his faces, and it must have messed up his head. Still confused about the whole situation, he turned around and looked in the other direction. Sung-hyun realized that he was sharing his vision with the Avatar's eyes. He tried to move the avatar, but moving a separate body was a lot more nauseating than he thought. Moving both his avatar and main body was practically impossible. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough time to experiment further as the countdown reached the last minute. Sure, he had an ability, but having a perfect clone of his weak body seemed futile. Of all the abilities out there, he got stuck with something that just highlighted how useless he was. He wondered if some hero could save the day and go to the other world in his stead. Before Sungyun could even finish his thought, he realized that he might just have the perfect setup to do just that. So, he willed his avatar to walk forward and step into the transfer zone, and the process kicked off. He concentrated on controlling the clone as much as he could. Finally, the blue light of the transfer zone intensified. Sungyun just wanted to throw a Hail Mary and test an insane idea out. But the transfer zone recognized his avatar as him. The avatar was successfully transported to the Auterica dimension. From out of thin air, his clumsily equipped body spawned in the middle of a forest. He looked at his body and the surroundings curiously. We all saw him send the avatar into the zone, yet his consciousness had seemingly tagged along. Fortunately, the system was kind enough to inform him that he could always return to Earth through the return option in the Karma shop. Speaking of karma, those things were the main point system that he could collect and accumulate through his adventures. Currently, he has 0 karma, an absolute broke boy. Once again, that stinging pain inside his mind returned. His perception was split between the forest and the living room. His consciousness didn't transfer to the other world. He was just sharing his vision with the avatar. Seeing 2 different worlds at once could really mess with a person's mind, so in an attempt to curb the head-splitting pain, he cancelled his summoning. Suddenly the clone was deleted, and his perception returned to normal as he fell on his ass. He was still inside his house. He felt sick to his stomach. Surprisingly, he managed to run to the bathroom before throwing his guts up after experiencing multidimensional travel. Looking on the bright side, at least he managed to dodge the urgent transfer crisis. He turned to the side and summoned his avatar once more. Sungyun wondered just what he was supposed to do with such a useless ability from now on. His pondering was interrupted by a congratulatory message for achieving a great feat, courtesy of the system. He managed to return to Earth on his own without using the Karma shop after all. As a special reward, he gained access to a dimensional transfer gate that could be used once a day to move to a previously visited location. On top of that, his karma had greatly increased. And just like that, he became the Awakened who returned to Earth in the shortest time ever. Bro accidentally speedran his isekai story by discovering a bug. From 0 karma, the system rewarded him with a mind-melting 1.9 million karmas. He just gained a shit ton of points for simply unsummoning his avatar without doing anything else. That would be roughly 10 years worth of accumulated karma all at once. As far as Sungyun knew, karma is paid based on the impact one has in other worlds. It could be gained through all kinds of things: good deeds, bad deeds, killing people, working hard, practically everything. Accumulating karma was the main way to strengthen one's skills and even return to Earth. With the sudden windfall of such precious karma, he worried that the system made a mistake and might ask him to return the points. Well, it was not like he cheated or messed up on purpose, so he shouldn't be liable, right? He could easily return to Earth, so the return home item worth 1 million karma was worthless to him. The enhanced status option, on the other hand, was quite eye-catching. Under stamina, he found an enhanced recovery power option worth 10,000 karma. Since he was rich in these imaginary points now, the temptation of the word recovery was practically irresistible. He clicked on the option, and a mysterious power started flowing right into his legs. For the first time in a while, he felt life in his toes. The injury he had been trying to recover from for years started healing at a visible rate. To him, this injury was not merely an inconvenience. It was a wound that marked the loss of his family. The scars that he retained served as the locks that confined him to this lonely room for a long time. Now that his recovery power had surpassed the standard human level, standing up without the assistance of a crutch had become possible. Just like that, he gained a super recovery skill. By nighttime, he had already gotten used to using his legs again. They even got ridiculously strong, stronger than before the incident. Furthermore, he still had a lot of karma remaining in the bank and a lot of things to spend on. For 300,000 karmas, he could enhance his original skill, which meant upgrading his avatar. Without a hint of hesitation, he purchased the upgrade and wondered what he would be able to do with an enhanced avatar skill. To test out the improvements, he summoned the avatar and admired how manly it looked. Surprisingly, the clone returned the compliment. With the enhanced skill, he could now split his consciousness into 2, allowing him to move freely without any problems. Sungyun also obtained a new skill through the enhancement. It was called Mind Hub. It was a skill that filtered out stimuli and emotions, accepting only the information and sensations he wanted to accept. Not only would he be free from dimensional sickness, but his main body could also filter out the pain if his avatar happened to get hurt. He tested it out by punching the clone. With the avatar knocked out on the floor, Sunghyun celebrated the fact that he could continue venturing into other worlds from the comfort of his room. He could control his avatar as though he was playing a very realistic video game. Moreover, he could summon an additional avatar now, pushing his limit to 2. Sunghyun wondered if he could continuously increase the number of his clones as he grew. To make things easier, these avatars were going to need some names. Admittedly, he didn't have the best naming sense in the world, but Han Sunghyun racked his brain for names. He saw some loose trash on the table, an empty coffee cup and a ketchup pouch, and figured it out. From now on, the first avatar with a high mana affinity will be referred to as Hans, named after the coffee shop where he got the cup. As for the second avatar, with decent durability, he was named Heinz, as in Heinz ketchup. Those mana affinity and durability traits weren't bad, but Sunghyun viewed them as duds. With identifications cleared up, maybe it was time to do the long-awaited main quest now. So he sent Hans to the dimensional transfer gate. As for Heinz, he was tasked to just chill and look good on the couch. Han Sunghyun also had a very important quest to fulfill. He cleaned his place and carried out a year's worth of trash. It had been a long time since he tried and failed, but now, he might be able to finally step outside. After years of isolation, he finally felt the sun on his skin once more. Unlike before, he did not feel anxious about going out at all. This was in part thanks to the ability to use Mind Hub. While he was out, Hans must have arrived in the other world too. By the time Hans had teleported, it was already nighttime in the forest. Just as he was praying for safe passage, hoping nothing would sneak up on him in the dark, a predatory glint appeared nearby. A huge and ravenous black panther came out of the foliage, its gaze fixed on Hans like it was looking at a delicious dinner meal. The beast pounced forward, and Hans reacted by drawing the blade he had prepared beforehand. He used the blade's scabbard to stop the Black Panther's attack, letting the animal gnaw on steel. The panther's drool slathered all over the scabbard, and it was nasty. As expected of Mind Hub, Hans did not feel the slightest bit of fear or pain in this intense situation. Just like he thought, it was like playing a very realistic game. With the panther retreating, Hans charged forward with a blade injected with mana. In one stab, the panther's blood spilled on the grassy floor of the quiet forest. He would not have been able to do this if he hadn't kept his composure. This encounter just reminded him of how weak he still was. At this rate, staying in this forest and coming across another monster would be very troublesome. Thankfully, he could see a nearby village down the trail. This small village was situated between the forest and the rocky terrain. The place looked peaceful enough. As soon as he entered the front gates, Hans was warmly welcomed by a kind-looking bald old man who introduced himself as Malcolm, the village chief. Chief Malcolm praised the young man for passing through the monster-infested forest path in the late hours of the night. Hans acted modestly and played along. He also asked permission to stay in the village, even just for the night. The kind chief welcomed him with open arms, saying that they should help each other out. In Chief Malcolm's eyes, Hans's outfit and equipment looked foreign. The young man just downplayed the whole thing. The chief said that coming across outsiders was rare in these parts, and it had been a long time since the last one. So, to celebrate, they should grab a drink at the village tavern. With the help of the kind chief, Hans was provided with an empty room to rest his head. He felt wholly welcomed by the warm-hearted village. It had been a while since he enjoyed being around other people. He even drank. Today was a fun day, but it was time to turn in and rest his eyes. While he was deep in slumber, a stranger sneakily entered the room. Meanwhile, Han Sunghyun's main body was also celebrating on Earth. A cold glass of beer hit the right spot. He showered, ordered chicken and beer, and watched as his avatar traveled the other world. It was the perfect setup. Sunghyun felt a little sorry for Heinz, though. While he was chilling, the second avatar had to do health training to utilize his durability trait to the utmost extent. He didn't have plans to dispatch him just yet, but it's good to be prepared in advance. Since the clones were working so hard, it would be up to Sunghyun to find out more info about the other world. From the comfort of his living room, he would play the role of the perfect commander-in-chief. He was in a fantastic mood until he felt something amiss with Hans. An ominous feeling nagged at the back of his mind as though something bad had just happened. Suddenly the system informed him that his avatar, Hans, had died. All traits and data would be reset. Hans was just celebrating and drinking with the villagers a few minutes ago, and now he's gone. While Sunghyun was trying to figure out what the hell happened in the other world, Heinz was busy munching on some chicken. Logic dictates that it must be the old guy, village chief Malcolm, behind this duplicitous act. He must have spiked the drinks. Sunghyun could only blame himself for being too complacent in an unfamiliar place. Surprisingly, he started re-establishing the connection with his supposedly dead avatar. Back in the village, Chief Malcolm expressed his disappointment in the newcomer, whom he thought would be useful. Hans passed through the forest alone in the dark, so this bald head thought he would be talented. Yet here he was, stripped of his flesh, blood, and organs, an undead in the form of an elite